I've been away for a while, going through some lifestyle changes and making important decisions and changing cities that ultimately brought me back to London, for now. Recently, I've been snowed under a lot of work. And naturally, what happens to most of us, myself included, is we kind of forget why we started in the first place, what's really important. So, long story short, here I am, back at it, doing and talking about what I love. By now, you've noticed that maybe things are a little bit different, the scene is different, courtesy to my producer, George and Buddy, thank you for that, who provided us with the studio. I believe that the topics that we want to cover here in this podcast are going to be much suited for a format that is more of a podcast rather than just, normal videos. Some of you may know me, most of you don't, so a little bit about me. For the past 10 years or so, I've been interested in pursuing mostly business ventures, which have been successful in their own right. Now I run a marketing agency called Collective Growth Media. I've been heavily invested into personal development, running men's circles, and have been mildly obsessed with martial arts. I recently started jiu-jitsu. I became a jiu-jitsu practitioner and really became obsessed with that the moment I stepped on the mat. So there is a lot of other interest about me, but let's start with that. Why you should listen to this podcast? Well, if you're anything like me, some of these things might resonate. Maybe you grew up without a father figure in your life, or maybe your father was there and present, but your relationship wasn't as good, and you suffered as a result. And you started looking for this father figure, for this big brother that can really help you, let you in on big brother secrets, a mentor or a wise confidant. Or maybe you are a bit scattered right now. You're trying different things. Most of those didn't really amount to anything. And maybe you got involved with the wrong crew or in a gang like I did. And you're in a pursuit for something much more meaningful. But you're just not quite sure what that is yet. So that's been all me for sure. I remember when I was a kid, I really badly needed someone to guide me. I needed another man, a mentor to teach me some essential skills. How to talk to women and how to carry myself properly, how to do sports and be competitive and build confidence. But despite how badly we need one, we seldomly get it, at least not straight away. Fast forward 10 years later, in my early 20s, I've been fortunate enough to meet and work with some great teachers throughout my life that have taught me a lot, some good things and some bad things. Now, with regards to the podcast, the underlying thing is going to be challenges we face as modern men and what lessons we've learned so far about masculinity, about life, and of course finding that deeper, meaningful purpose that I think every man should have. Because I personally want to grow as a man. I want to be able to connect with others who are into the same thing I am. Jiu-jitsu and stoicism and philosophy and psychology, business, spirituality. And I want to learn from these people. Also share some of my lessons so other people don't have to go through the same thing I did. The idea is very simple. Create a space and have conversation worth having for us as men. A place where we can talk about the things that are often on our minds, but we seldomly get the chance to talk about them in an open way. And I believe we face very unique challenges today as men. Most of us feel quite lost. Maybe not all of the time, but certainly it becomes more like a prevalent theme today. And especially for most millennial men, we really struggle to find a deeper meaning, a purpose in our lives. Something that I've been struggling for a very, very long time. It was really funny. We were here at the exact same studio last week. We were preparing for the podcast. I was helping a friend, and I struck this conversation with this guy who, we started chatting. I was telling him about what I do and this podcast, and guess what? Same exact thing. He's a probably 25-year-old guy, works in an office, normal 9-to-5 job, but he feels it's not his calling in life. He feels really empty, really hollow, maybe is the right word. And he wants something more deep, so something way more meaningful. So guess what? He decides to enroll into the army. in pursuit of more of a purpose in his life. And eventually wants to go up and start his own company in Africa. After he finishes with his military duty, because he wants to give back. So same thing over and over again. Here we will try to address a bunch of these topics and of course share my own experiences, some quite serious and some very funny. As always, have incredible guests who can shed some light on these topics too. I think the first few episodes are going to be solo because I want to talk about things that I think every man should know. And I think that they're very relevant and very important for us as men. So, meaningful topics. Something that we should really cover is the foundation. And maybe we didn't have the chance to do so for whatever reason. That being said, it's important to distinguish between things that are important, I think every man needs to hear or experience, and more of the mainstream topics that we wouldn't really be covering here. Like picking up chicks, for example, or what's your grooming like, or grooming your hair and fashion and style and clothes and perfumes and all that type of stuff that, every essentials that every man should have. Now, don't get me wrong. I do believe that you want to have good social skills. You want to be able to effectively communicate with people. And of course, walking around as a stinky ass. But after a certain period, that is no longer as important. It's not the core of what this content is going to be about. For this particular episode, we will address a topic that is quite dear to my heart. And I believe the majority of men are missing today as a crucial part of their development. What I'm really talking about is the rites of passage and the relationship between that and becoming a proper man. I think most men don't even know what a rites of passage is. I certainly did for a good portion of my life. And it was something that was kind of obvious, but I didn't even know that I was missing. It's this lack of sacred experience in modern days that most men are stuck in a developmental arrest. They wander around. But let me ask you a question. What is a man? What's your idea? What's your understanding? Whenever you hear that word, what is a man? What comes to you? I don't think most people hear the word man, they think of an adult human being, which is totally the opposite of what I'm talking and what we're going to be talking about in this podcast. In fact, it's a question I've been asking myself for a very long time, probably for the last 26 or 27 years. It's been really something that I've been struggling to find and understand what it is a man to me today, and something I've struggled for quite a while. It's been literally probably in the last 3 years or so that I really began to get the grips of this, and I kind of get to know a little bit about it. I'm not saying I'm nowhere near that, but I'm way on my way, and that's for sure. When I was growing up, I associated being a man with very different things. Most likely the wrong things. Either how much money you made or what type of car you were driving. The flashy stuff that most boys would normally see and then, oh yeah, he's the man. Maybe even the type of girl you were dating at the time, or how big are your muscles. And I was quite insecure as a result because I was lacking all of those, right? And naturally my confidence really sunk to a very low point. I remember looking at my dad and thinking, he's not really making that much money. He's not really a great man. And I thought, this isn't right. I felt quite insecure about it. Because I associated money with the sense of security, basic need being covered, I didn't quite understand exactly what was happening. What was the underlying theme there, which wasn't anything remotely as connected to money. But of course, this was just surface level stuff. I was really getting very confused. And at the same time, I didn't really have good role models as a kid. Naturally, I began to be quite mischievous and rebellious. I'm sure some people are listening right now saying, yep, I didn't also have good role models. So it brings me to a funny story. My father, for example, probably the nicest man ever. Always willing to help others, always willing to, put his entire reputation on the line just because he gave his word and he didn't want to let people down or him look bad in other people's eyes. But sometimes he would be very strict to punish. So one night I decided to borrow some money to buy an action figure, as every maybe 9 or 10-year-old kid wants. In my mind, it was just justified because I knew we had some money somewhere. And I had already asked my father and he'd said no. And I was like, I know he has money. I just take it and go and buy the action figure. Simple as that, right? I had no concept of stealing. My dad didn't really explain it to me. It was it was really bad. It was a bad idea in general, taking money. And he didn't explain to me the consequences if I was to do something like that, something that they'll come to realize very soon. So I just didn't know how bad it was going to be to steal money at the time. So at the same time, I was obsessed. I was obsessed to getting this, small action figure. So one day after school, I went to the local market and I saw the toy on display. Man, this was like a scene from a movie. I'm here, like window shopping, watching this toy being displayed and almost kind of hanging from above a little bit. And it was just like almost like a magical scene where angels are singing. And all this like bright light reflecting the package, and this action figure with all these muscles, could move his hands, could shoot all these gadgets from his cape, or wrapped around a white cape. Man, it was everything a 9 or 10-year-old kid could dream of. And when I eventually bought the toy with not my money, with the money I'd borrowed, let's say, I was ecstatic. The air didn't feel as good as me glossing the package and feeling the weight in my hands. I was the happiest kid in the world for about 2 hours. So after that, I took the package, put it on my under my jacket, and just sprinted home. After all, I was thinking about this for about 2 weeks or so, 24/7. Just how can I get the toy? How the toy is gonna look like? I was having dreams about it. It was crazy. I snuck the toy and then just past my mother, quickly went all the way up to the top floor of the house, thinking I'm safe away from, unnecessary attention and anybody could potentially ruin and spoil this special moment for me. So impatiently shaking with excitement, I started unboxing the toy, only to hear my mother's voice behind my back asking, "What is that?" I had no answer. I just literally froze. So, as every good mother would do, she told my dad. And once he came back from work in the evening, all hell's fury went hunting after my ass. It was quite a scene. Like, I remember the moment he realized what had just happened, he literally jumped from his bed, came directly at me, grabbed me with two of his hands and just lift me up like this and started yelling in my face whilst my 2 feet are kind of dangling like two meat sticks. Then he did probably the worst thing that I was the most afraid of. I was afraid of darkness, hence the whole scene here, the way it's been set up. I was really afraid as a kid. Man, it was terrifying for me. So basically he dragged me outside and he threw me out. It was like pitch black night, everybody's awake. It was quite late in the evening. And he locked the door and then switched off the light. Click. Now things get a little bit blurry because I can't really remember. It was quite a traumatic moment for me. So my mom told me she could hear me screaming outside and scratching the door and hysterically screaming and hitting the door. And after that continued several minutes, she found me terrified outside in a puddle of my own urine. It was quite an intense moment. I don't really remember it that much, but I think your brain kind of shields you from all this trauma, so you kind of naturally forget it. But the experience there made me very distant from my father. I knew he was going to punish me. I was terrified from him every single time I did something wrong or which wasn't allowed. And I think that's why I was shying away from developing a good, healthy relationship with my father and in men in general. Something that is essential for one, if we want to, grow from malehood into manhood. In contrast, I remember looking at my big cousin. Man, he was a rower. He was like really jack dude with super big muscle. And I'm thinking, man, how cool is it to be like him? Like, chicks adored him. Just every single time they see him, they're like, oh my gosh, he's back in town. And all the guys wanted to be like him. And I'm like sitting there thinking, my gosh, the things I would do just to be like him. Yet it took me 10 years or so again to realize that, even when I became like jacked and there was, a fair amount of good, beautiful women around me and, I'm having, a good guy friends, it was, again, still surface level stuff. By the way, I should say that I really love my father. I genuinely do. This is nothing to do with me being a victim or, blame him for anything that happened. In fact, I'm very grateful that it did happen because it set me on this path to try to understand myself more and then men and relationships and women, and etc., etc. So that was a very good lesson for me. And also, one thing I didn't realize as a child is that my parents also needed work on themselves and they had to learn certain lessons. So my lesson from all of this is that I'm really responsible for my own actions. That's the thing. And my actions also bring consequences. But coming back to all of this about being a man, I think my father did the right thing at the time, given whatever tools he had. Whether this is how a man should treat, the situation may be different, but it's again, very subjective. You're in a kind of a heat of the moment. You're, overcome with emotion. But I tried to really think about this for many years, and I genuinely think it's a generation thing. I spoke with my dad, and I asked him, okay, so what was your father like? My grandfather. And guess what? He wasn't there for him the same way my father wasn't most of the time around me, because he was working all the time and he was quite strict. He, taught him about hard work, but was very emotionally unavailable. So that deep, really foundational, underlying masculine structure was missing. When I talk about this stuff, most people don't really realize that the son-father relationship is the most wounded relationship. And I speak to a lot of guys and they told me pretty much the same thing. Oh, my father wasn't around, or, he was traveling all the time, or I really never get to see him for whatever reason. And yeah, this sounds very familiar. Does it sound to you? I think by being deprived of this masculine presence and structure, there is a void that opens up in us, and especially in every man, especially in every young man. Most of the time, you don't even know what happens just because it happens over a prolonged period of time and everything becomes gradual, but it is definitely there. I think this is a good example of what happens when the boy isn't initiated into manhood and is left oftentimes fighting demons of childhood rather than developing in a fulfilled man. Have you ever fought demons as a child? Maybe demons from your childhood? I know I did a lot. You don't even need to look further to see that many men nowadays are struggling socially, I think, as a result of having demons like that. And obviously a lot of things have changed, but, majority, myself included, we were struggling socially and still to this day are to some extent. Spiritually, mentally, financially, sexually, choosing to stay in the confines of our parents' house most of the time. Like, a lot of my friends actually still stay with their parents, which is kind of mind-boggling to me. But instead of, breaking out of that comfort and testing the unknown waters of independence, they sit still. And I think this is something that definitely contributes to this. It's like the the Peter Pan syndrome. The someone fails to grow up, never really grows up. Instead, I think most men who are striving to get out of their cocoon, they strive for something better. I think majority prefer the familiar world of pornography and video games. Something that I've been guilty of for a long time. I remember I used to play video games for hours. Like I was like so invested in this game, StarCraft. I would just like maybe pouncing like 12 hours a day. I wouldn't even go to the toilet. This is how badly I just wanted to win, and just like the whole competitiveness of me, like being a little bit, maybe a bit of a tyrant. I would just like, I'll smash this guy, and like let him show him. Like I wouldn't go to the toilet. I would get all these rashes around my body, just because I was just like so intensely focused on that game. And of course, pornography. You gotta be honest here. You've at least maybe once, like all of my friends had some issues with pornography. That's quite bizarre to me. And I'd say these are like really relatively healthy, well-rounded, mentally guys. They know what they want to do, but some of us, most of us actually get caught up in this void of pornography because everything is so easy. Something I definitely, struggle with and identify with a lot. And I think slowly but steadily, we become hollow men, drifting along quietly as a result of not getting outside of the comfort zone and staying within this cocoon. We kind of have no path or no purpose, and we almost become like bystanders of our own life, just watching things go by. And this happens to both men and women. Adults are psychologically stunted in their maturation. They occupy the body of an adult, but their mental development fails to keep up. Most of us are a generation of men raised by women. Mothers have always been the ones who spend more time with the children and maintain more physical contact throughout the early year. They are more nurturing and empathic towards emotional pains and needs. The father, on the other hand, is associated often with the three fundamentals of being a man, or the 3 P's as I call them: protector, provider, procreator. The parental roles have shifted quite a lot today, quite drastically, I'd say. And while this can be a good thing, most men are quite confused about this shift and what their role is in all of this. The father's role is responsible for providing guidance to the boy in breaking that bond with the mother and going out into the world in order to become a whole, functional, independent adult. Most of us, myself included, have been raised to be quite soft by well-intentioned mothers who showered us with love, and thus not allowing to develop properly and mature. Most of us didn't get the chance to experience this really savage part in us, this primal, deeply rooted part. And most men aren't even aware that it exists. A part of you that's like the warrior part, that you'd go and experience in competitions. I didn't have a chance to compete as I was young, and I think I missed quite a lot as a result. Being in camps surrounded by other men, and there was something that, because I was born in a very small town, there was something I would have enjoyed to do as I was a kid. And I think instead, a big portion of our lives, we wander in silence, trying to confirm and not really offend people. As a result, we're kind of this kind of bystander, like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, making sure everybody's okay. And oh man, saying this, I just reminds me of so many times I've been this guy who makes sure there is no confrontation and everybody is fine and everybody's feeling well. I'm like trying to think what I'm gonna say not to offend the other person. And again, this comes back all the way back to your parents and how you've been brought up, and you just gotta identify these patterns and really start untangling these knots, because that's really carries with yourself in adulthood. I think by not living up to these inner potentials, by not nurturing that part of us, we silently deprive ourselves, our families, and even to the world of one of our greatest gifts. By not developing that inner warrior, which needs to be guided, not necessarily misguided, which we'll talk about as well, We make a compromise with ourselves, and as a result, I believe we silently kill a part of ourselves. Especially today, where part of society is quite confused about the notion of masculinity. Some people even see it as a bad thing. As men, we aren't dealing with it very well either. I remember when I was growing up as a kid, and I look at my cousin who was, bigger than me, and I look at my dad, for example, and all the uncles, and I'm thinking, okay, that's fine. There's gonna be a day where I just, magically become an adult. I just wake up one day and boom, I'm a functioning adult, a wise man who knows how to navigate through life. Well, guess what? You wake up as the same boy 30 years later, only to realize that there is no such event, at least not today. The world we live nowadays is really missing these rites of passage. What's a rites of passage? In every ancient culture, there was a ritual, a sacred event guided by the elders, the elderly males, the tribal and cultural fathers that transitioned boys into manhood. In this transition, this event was really quite full on, very, very intense. It was something very difficult, something like, you'll take your whole being, your mind, emotions, and your body to the brink. And the thing is, we like being a boy. We like the freedom. We like the freedom of responsibility. Being the boy is fun. You can do whatever you like, whenever you like. I remember that. Who doesn't want to be a boy, right? But after a certain stage, you really see that that's no longer serving you at all. And if we don't really keep a tap on this and we don't really keep it in check, the sense of freedom and, a freedom of responsibility can carry into adulthood. Now, a great story about rites of passage, and something that when I saw it, I was just like, wow. Like everything clicked. This was like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So it was this movie called The Emerald Forest, which is a British drama. I think it was 1985, and it took place in the Brazilian rainforest. So the plot is there is the son of an engineer who was deployed in the Brazilian rainforest for a big project, is being abducted by Aboriginal tribes and on the edge of the rainforest. So then the father, who's the engineer, spends the next 10 years or so searching into the rainforest for his boy. Now into the movie, in one of the scenes, the wise chief sees the boy, now coming of age, is playing with a girl into the river. And this sexual interest, this awakening, is a signal to the wise chief. So he goes to the river bank with some of the tribe elders and shouts out, Tommy is the character, the boy. Tommy, your time has come to die. And Tommy is like, huh? He looks astonished, not knowing exactly what's about to happen or what to think of all of this. Then there is a shift in the scenes, and we find Tommy seemingly tortured by the elders who've surrounded him and is eaten alive by these giant jungle ants. They're like, whenever they sting you, it's so painful. So he screams in agony. His body is being mutilated and mangled by the ants. We fear the worst. Finally, the sun rises, and after a few hours of intense pain, Tommy is brought to the river by the elders, where he is bathed and the ants washed from his body. The same chief appears and says, Tommy, the boy is dead, and the man is born. Following that, Tommy undergoes his first spiritual experience, whereby the elders use a psychedelic drug blown through a very long pipe into his nose. The boy proceeds in a wild dance around a bonfire in front of the entire tribe, clearly having a psychedelic experience, and begins to hallucinate. During that, he discovers his animal soul, a flying eagle, soaring above the world with a new and expanded consciousness, seeing the totality of the jungle world. Tommy is now a man and is allowed to marry. As he takes the responsibility of a man, he's moved up the hierarchy and eventually becomes the tribe's chief. It can often be said that life's perhaps most fundamental dynamic is the attempt to move from a lower form of consciousness and experience into a higher consciousness state. We seek these initiations into adulthood and responsibility, into adult responsibilities and duties towards ourselves and others. All of human life attempts to move forward in those lines. These rituals were sometimes seen as savage by today's standards. However, some remote and isolated cultures and tribes still do this till this day in 2019. And I really think we're missing something as a result of not going through something like this. I'm not saying that you should do that and volunteer and go to the rainforest and get eaten alive by jungle ants, but something similar, something that's going to really push you mentally, physically, emotionally to the brink. Now, I think as a result of this event not missing, today's masculinity is maybe deconstructed, maybe is a bit too analytical. Redefined probably is a bit of a too weak of a word. It's probably attacked. Yeah, that's the right word. I believe there is no such thing as toxic masculinity as some parts of society tries to portray in the mainstream. There is, however, men who aren't masculine that are toxic. Weak men, little men who abuse women instead of stepping up to lead and protect. This goes back to the father wasn't being present in the boy who hasn't developed and has stunted its development. I think it's called developmental arrest. And I think our society is suffering from a shortage of masculinity. What is missing is not what most depth psychologists are assuming is missing, that is the adequate connection with the inner feminine. It's actually on the other side. If you think about it, in many cases we're overwhelmed by the feminine. Masculinity today is in crisis. What most of us are missing is the adequate connection to the masculine, the deep and instinctual masculine energies, the potentials of mature masculinity. But these are being blocked by the lack in our lives of any meaningful or transformatory process by which one could have achieved a sense of manhood. Since the Industrial Revolution, dads aren't present around to teach us as boys how to become men. Dad belongs to the world of work now. And as a result, we grow up with a boy psychology. Can any of you guys identify? Do you guys know anybody who is a boy man? Someone who wasn't able to mature and who's being constantly a victim, maybe has a bit of a tyrant energies inside of him. Then once in a while we try and be a man and society says, you should stop that. You should stop doing that. That's toxic. What do you think happens to men if that's the overarching process? And what do you think that results in? Take a moment right now to think if that's the case. If you're a grown-up boy, you filled all with these demons from childhood, maybe, with your father or something else happened traumatic, and society says, oh, you shouldn't, being masculine is toxic. I think most of us are quite out of touch with that mature masculinity. Most people, let alone men, don't even know what it is. It's not a goal for us at all. If we try to pursue that as men, we get discouraged by people and the environment around us. Like, I speak to some guys and they're like, what are you talking about, man? This is super weird. And for a long time I was thinking about it like, man, is this weird? Am I the only person? Because nobody else would identify for a while, especially when I came to London. Like, does nobody else sees this? Like, I'm always walking around with this filter to see, okay, oh, he probably had something to him. Not in a judgmental way, but just analytical and trying to understand, because everything has a story. Everything has a history behind it. But, for a long time, I was just like reading all these books and people like, dude, you're super weird. Why are you reading these books, especially in university? There is this great concept by Alan Watts called the backward law concept. And the idea is that the more you pursue a feeling better all the time, the less satisfied you become. as pursuing something only reinforces the fact that you lack it in the first place. The desire for a more positive experience is itself a negative experience, and paradoxically, the acceptance of one's negative experience is itself a positive experience. If the pursuing the positive is negative, then pursuing the negative generates the positive. And I think that's what's happening today. Everybody's pursuing all these like quick fixes and the dopamine hits and the social media and the Tinders and the porn and the fast food, and we're only pursuing the solving a problem, and there is no, that in itself creates a problem. But I think generally we as men are fueled by challenge. We grow through that and we rise to the occasion. Now, through a lot of technology, a lot of these things have been eradicated, which in itself poses a problem, as I said. By having things too easy, we fall prey of addictions. Porn addiction, fast food addiction, video games addiction. Yep, also guilty of that. Anxiety because of expectations from work, from loved ones, from society. I've been experiencing anxiety for such a long time. I think the reason why I haven't told it that much is because I didn't see it that way. I didn't see, I experience constantly anxiety, but I just have it in my stomach all the time, like, oh, shit, I need to breathe. And now I'm like, okay, so I'm experiencing also this thing, but I just choose to label it in a very different way. But coming back to this, not to sidetrack, I think I would suggest that becoming a mature man, a leader, an elder of the society, has nothing to do with treating women like they're less than you, or using power or using fear, intimidation to control other people. I don't think it's about that at all. I think there's a completely different world, a whole new experience of being a man. Once you get to that stage, of course, you go through these rites of passage and something definitely clicks. And I would also suggest that as a man of this generation, millennials, this should be one of our highest priorities that not many people are talking about. They kind of are, and you have the Jordan Petersons of the world, which I'm a big fan of, but we need more. We need more of that. Now, hence the Rites of Passage. I want to read you a passage from a book called The Fragile Male by Ben Greenstein. It's worth examining some examples of the rites of passage to which boys are subjected in order to turn them into men. These rituals symbolize a change in identity, a form of rebirth, as it was called by a pioneer of the manhood studies, Arnold van Gennep, in his book The Rites of Passage. He interprets these rites as a form of death of the boy and a rebirth as a man. He saw that in 3 stages: separation from woman in childhood, change, and establishment of the man. The boy has to reject his maternal input and is taken away from his mother by force. Next, he is placed in a no man's land where he is neither a man or a boy, where his body will be prepared by ordeal for the entry of a man. Finally, he leaves his place of isolation and he can practice as a man in the world. The Maasai boy, which lay in the border of, I think, Kenya and Tanzania, was not considered a man until he dipped the spear in a lion. Can you imagine that? Having a freaking spear and just running after or running at straight towards a lion, and you have to kill it with a spear. Imagine growing up like that. Imagine that you wouldn't be considered a man until you killed a lion or a really dangerous animal with a spear. Even just reading this out loud makes it super surreal. We're so isolated from these experiences. I'm not saying you should go and do that now, but there's other ways that you can really experience the rites of passage to really mature. Can you imagine what that's going to be like? And imagine this, how would you feel after, once that it happened, something very intense would have happened? The Maasai didn't believe that manhood is inevitable. It had to be deliberately induced. A door has to be open, a door to manhood. They would also have to endure circumcisions without flinching. Like, imagine all these elders come together and it says, today you're going to become a man and we're going to cut a part of your penis with this thing that we sharpen all our swords and spears. And then the Maasai boy will be taken into a tent and he has to lay down on a table or on the ground, and he's only allowed to look in one direction. If you flinch, if for the duration of this, if you flinch, if you show any emotion, if you scream or show, pain, you're not considered a Maasai man, and you're not a man. That's it. Now, obviously, this is, I'm depicting it in a way that's very brutal, which it is, and it's very savage. But that's a test, right? With all the intensity, with all the people that you look up to as a boy, all the male figures, they know that you're probably going to go through something like this, even though it's going to be painful, but it's a test for you not to show emotion and really be able to go through this. And I don't think many of us have had the I think it's a privilege. We didn't have the privilege to go through a rites of passage. I'm not saying that people should be cutting parts of your dick or that you should be killing wild animals, but right now, today, everything is changing constantly so much that we have our own initiations, maybe to some extent perverted versions of that, maybe fraternities, for example, or gangs like I was a part of, and you get smashed by, drinking a lot of alcohol, and then that's kind of the thing that's bonding you together, or you do something really stupid, or you get in a fight or something like that with the other boys, and yeah. But probably the story that I could really relate, which comes the closest to a rites of passage, is when I dropped out of university and came to London by myself. that was quite scary at the time. So, I had some self-esteem issues, as I said before. So making a giant leap like this for me was huge. I was insecure, like my English was basic was an understatement. And I remember it as if it was yesterday. So the year is 2009, so 10 years ago. Maybe I'm 19, just about to turn 20. I'm in Bulgaria, which is my birthplace. After seeing two of my best friends, George and my buddy Martin, who's probably listening as well, they go abroad, they leave. And I'm sitting there by myself, and for my first year of university, we're getting smashed, the normal stuff that most first year students would do. You get smashed, you go out, you get, drink again, and then maybe bring a chick back home. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, what am I doing with my life? I felt quite lonely at the time, because two of my best buddies, like literally I've known them for maybe 20 years now, they just left. So I'm thinking to myself, are you going to, choke into mediocrity, or are you going to make a decision for something better? I'm not saying mediocrity for the whole, Bulgaria or et cetera, but that's how I felt it. I felt I meant to do better. By no means am I saying it should be done that way, but for me, that was the way forward. Little did I know that every decision I made till this day would put me on a path of ultimate adventure. Really, that was the adventure of a lifetime. The moment I made that decision, I was just like, wow, this is happening. Like, things became surreal. So I'm like, okay, I wake up, I made that decision already in my head. I go to the office, I announce it to the lady. I remember she was like sitting here, like typing something, and then I just say, I want to quit. She's like with these small glasses, what? Excuse me? If you quit, you can't come back. You have to retake tests. I said, yep, that's fine. I want to drop out of university. A couple of days later, I call my parents. They tell them the same. And, I'm proudly announcing where I'm heading to London, and I'm going to spend it with my best buddy. I remember, I was feeling a blend of anxiety and excitement at the same time. After all, I was about to make the leap into the complete unknown, away from my parents, my brother. My friends, on the other hand, in university, they saw things quite differently. Everybody I was hanging out at the time started really mocking me, saying that, what are you going to do in London, bro? That you're freaking crazy. If you fail, you have to come back and redo all these tests, and it's going to be quite difficult. What's there to do in London anyway besides shopping? You're going to miss out, man. So stay here. Don't do something crazy, man. Meanwhile, I'm thinking to myself, you're doing the right thing. Fast forward, maybe about 3 weeks later, I'm about to head to the airport. And my parents didn't have enough money, so we had to borrow, I think, about £1,500, from what I remember, from some family friends. So we drive to Sofia, which is the capital. And on the same day, I had to go and check my eyes because whether I need glasses or not, because things were a little bit blurry. So we drive to the clinic. The doctor puts these eye drops in my eyes, and my iris gets massive, as if I've taken some crack or some drug. So I literally cannot see, like, two meters ahead of me. I cannot see anything. I'm just like half blind. To the outside world, I would have easily looked like I'm on some serious substance. Anyway, they check me in. Everything is good. We just barely finish on time. And then my father drives like a madman to the airport so we don't miss the flight. Oh, did I say this was my first flight, like, ever? I was terrified. I was confused. Picture this. I'm sitting there in my t-shirt, half blind, confused as fuck. No idea what's happening next. So we have some security and some check-in and luggage and all these like super new terms to me. So, but is this luggage the right weight? And I have to take some stuff out, and my mother getting all emotional and like crying there. And literally I'm seeing this, can't see, I'm not able to see a damn thing. It was so bad. And fast forward 10 minutes, we were about to board the plane. And these little thoughts, every single time you commit to something, you want to step up, you want to go to the next level, you want to challenge your comfort zone. All these, quiet conversations begin to happen in the back of your mind. Am I doing the right thing? I mean, what am I thinking? What are we doing here? You dropped out of university to go to a different country? Who are you kidding, bro? What are you going to do? Like, it's not going to happen. This is what all of this thing is happening. Like, who are you kidding? And good thing I was already on the plane, and there is no coming back. I remember greeting the flight attendant in Bulgaria and then realizing she's actually not I think she was from the UK. So I'm confused as fuck. Like, I thought, but one sec, they're in Bulgaria and the stewardess needs to be Bulgarian as well, but not, yeah. Anyways, very, very confused. So that confused me even more. So it takes me ages to find my seat. I literally cannot see anything. I'm so embarrassed to ask someone because everybody speaks English. I'm not confident in my English as well. So it takes me forever. Like, one of the stewardesses has to take my plane ticket and see, okay, where exactly I need to sit down, because I was really confused and a little bit scared. And yeah, okay, great. I'm next to the window, but I can't see fuck all. So I scrambled to figure out how to put on my seatbelt on afterwards. 3 minutes later, we were about to take off. And I kid you not, I was so damn nervous. My hands are so sweaty, as if someone put a fire hose in both of my sleeves. Just like all of this water just pouring out of my hands. Whew. Yeah, see, I get so emotional because I just remembered it was yesterday. The moment we take off, something weird happens. In the stomach gets a little bit like, and I'm thinking to myself, yep, we're about to die. And that's the exact same thing I was thinking about throughout the entire plane, throughout the entire flight. And every single time there was turbulence, I'm thinking, oh shit, I'm dying. So I'm, fair to say I was quite scared. By the time we land there, I'm so nervous. I still can't see a damn thing. I'm thinking, what's happening with these drops, man? This has been like 3 hours right now. I'm like, I cannot see anything. So I'm beginning to talk to myself, be prepared. Someone is going to pinch you and you're about to wake up. That's the first thing, the moment I stepped outside of the tunnel to get to the airport, that's the first thing I thought this was a dream for me. Like, okay, someone's going to pinch me. I wake up and everything is nice. But guess what? Nothing happened. This was for real. Welcome to London. That the announcement, my thoughts are raining quicker than Michael Schumacher in a Formula 1 race, just all the time. And I'm thinking, did I just do that? Did I just change my whole life? I left university, left my parents to come to a different country by myself. Like, what am I thinking? Like, yeah, pursuing maybe some kind of a pipe dream. It's too late for that, son. You're already out there. And we're leaving the plane. I'm pretending to be all cool and suave and, hoping to kind of figure out what to do next because I can barely see. And I'm about to go through security and my adrenaline rises. I was convinced that something is going to go wrong. I was going to happen, something's going to happen maybe with my passport or they see my eyes and instantly I end up in jail. So I see how quickly people are going through the immigration. Here comes my turn. I'm thinking, it's going to be good. Guy looks at me, looks at the passport, looks at me, looks at the passport, says, wait a minute. Where are you coming from? Bulgaria, like in my broken Eastern European accent. Hold on a minute. He goes to his colleagues, checks my passport, looks at me, they mumble something. Meanwhile, I'm sweating bullets. And then 5 minutes later, somehow miraculously, they let me through. I'm starting to sweat, even though it's like really cold, like maybe 10 degrees outside. But I'm like super sweaty already. The moment I make 6 or 7 steps afterwards, security stops me. They probably saw this, they cornered me and they, looked me in the eyes like, are you okay? Yeah. Where are you coming from? What's in the bag? So I start shaking, almost like opening the bag. I was like paralyzed. No clue what the fuck's happening, or I remember mumbling something, and yeah, that was quite an interesting experience. He must have seen how scared and confused I was, so he was just like, "Yeah, that's fine, cool." I opened the bag, I closed it, and I was on my way. Then it took me for ages to find the tube. I'm thinking how to, I should call my friend. I had this like really different SIM. I'm using a super basic Alcatel phone 10 years ago. Believe it or not, they weren't smartphones. So, I'm not able to connect to any Wi-Fi. And again, this feeling of overwhelm and a little bit of panic again takes over. I try to breathe, but I'm stiff as a board. 5-10 minutes later pass by and I'm still clueless as to how to navigate through all of this. Which train should I take? I see just people coming and going. I'm just like a little boy, scared as fuck. Zero clue what's happening. And no sign of my friend. So I'm like, what did I just do? I'm laughing right now, but I was shitless, really scared at the time. I turn around to see what, trains are coming in, and it's like a movie scene. Like people coming and going, trains, and then woof, one train coming, door opens. Here he is, my buddy. I'm like, oh. There was like the carriage opens, he comes outside, and it's just instant relief. We embrace. For the next 2 weeks, I'm proper depressed. The culture shock sinks in. I'm in like something like a 4-bedroom house that was converted to a 5-bedroom house with 1 toilet, 1 bathroom, 11 people living there. No living room, like illegal extensions. And this is not the majority. This is not the kind of the reality I was really expecting. And I think this is majority. This is the majority. Oh, this is the reality for majority of people coming to London, I think. My butt didn't tell me any of that. I was totally unprepared for what I was about to see. First, I'm in my t-shirt, and outside it's freezing cold. I didn't do any due diligence to see whether or not I can get a work permit. I spent all my money because I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to budget. I don't know how to spend my money. And I was never good at it, to be honest. I was never good at making money or keeping it. And depression sinks in even deeper. I'm embarrassed to ask my mom to send me more money because I know they don't have any, but nevertheless, they send me some. Also borrowed. I try to be proactive and stay upbeat. I go guerrilla mode in all the corner shops because I cannot get this work permit. They have to take me illegally. So I didn't beg, but I was just like walking around the whole neighborhood, every single store, just asking, I'll do whatever it takes. Maybe you want me to move boxes or clean the floor or whatever. Everybody said no. Everybody said no. I even printed out some CVs trying to hand them around. Oh, yeah, you look good. Yeah, do you have national insurance number? No, I don't. Oh, sorry, man, we can't do it. Oh, man, that took for like maybe 2 months. Then all of a sudden I imagined, okay, I'm going to be I'm going to try to do modeling. I'm this like big, bulky guy, maybe around 90 kilograms. But I look like a meathead, right? And I probably sent shots to like shirtless shots like this. And I probably sent it to about 20 modeling agencies. Everybody said no. Everybody. So I even thought at one point to become a gigolo. No joke. I've never really given it some serious thought, but there was like these, ads in the newspaper. I'm thinking, But no, it was never something that I would have done really. And I really had to think of something quick. Finally, I find this job, which later it turns out to be semi-legal in central London, working for like $4.25 an hour for 10 hours straight, maybe plus even more hours, trying to do double shifts most of the time. So just getting every single opportunity to get extra hours. Anyway, looking back at it right now, it really saved my ass. 3 months later, I get my paycheck. I'm like, because it was a month later. Actually, yeah, it was a month later to give me my first paycheck. I've never been so proud in my life. 6 months later, the contract finishes. I probably lost like 14 or 15 kilograms. But this was like my big test. With money in my pocket, I went back home to see the family, and that felt good. Boy, did that felt good. And that's it. That's the first story of my initiation, or the closest thing to I got from an initiation. Separated, and then go through all this turmoil for 6 months and non-stop work and stressing out and losing all this bunch of weight and depression, all these kind of things. And I came back home with some money, and then, I'm kind of the man of the hour. Have you guys been through something like this? I would love to know. Maybe drop a comment in the section below. Curious to know what your initiation has been if you haven't been through, something like this. If you have been, rather. And of course, there wasn't a bunch of elders to guide me through or to have an official ceremony. We just kind of create our own versions of this right now. Even though I think we're missing something as a result by not having gone through a proper ritual, we've created our own versions of these rituals. I'm curious to know about your initiation, dear Bachi. Maybe it was with a gang, or maybe it was with, again, you leaving home and dropping university. If not, what can you do now to put yourself in a similar situation where fear, uncertainty, and discomfort are present and ultimately become your compass towards growth? I'm not saying you should go through something really stupid or go and do a bunch of stuff right now, but go and do something challenging. Maybe it's 10-day meditation retreat. A lot of my friends did that. I will definitely at some point. Maybe it's through going and camping in the forest and have good friends. Maybe it's the first jiu-jitsu competition for me kind of felt a little bit similar. That was a very interesting experience. Maybe it's through ayahuasca and psychedelics. Maybe it's through travels. Maybe a special weekend where you go and be only around men. Join a men's circle or start one. I think we'll close it at that. I genuinely appreciate you guys stopping by. Thanks for taking the time to listen. Throw some questions in the comments below. I'd love to see what you guys think about this, the format. Send some questions. Also, type of content that you would like to see in the next episodes. So that's it. Until next week. If you've stayed up until the end and you've really enjoyed this podcast, here is my promise to you. I will make sure this podcast gets only better and better over time, but I'm gonna need your support. So if any of this resonated with you, make sure to hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, and I'll see you on the other side. Thank you.